Welcome back. Now, it is time for us to delve into the deepest, darkest parts of Ukita's mind and take on Subject N once again. The memory right before Ukita had been infected with Subject N's malice. Meaning we're going to find out the truth behind the body discovery?
ああ、分かっている。今度は渡瀬の時のように、僕まで侵食されないように注意するよ。
Natsuhiko pulled himself together and looked into Ukita's memories. This one began where Ukita saw Subject N's dead body. Knew it. This is where Mr. Ukita was infected with malice. It's accurate. Something felt off. It was too quiet. Confused, Natsuhiko looked around, only to find that Ukita was the only one there. Huh? And weren't the others with him at the time? Did he find them first, then? No, that wasn't all that was odd. Natsuhiko had looked around of his own accord, which meant... This isn't Mr. Ukita's memory? It's just like with Watase. A voice then filled the air.
どうやら気づいたようだね。これが通常の記憶ではないということに。
Oh. Natsuhiko gasped and watched in surprise as Subject N's body slowly stood up.
被験体 N？
いや、違う。僕は被験体 N ではない。かといって無論、浮田刑事本人とも違うがね。
What? He was talking much differently than the spirit of Subject N that Natsuhiko had encountered in Watase's head. Much like how that spirit's speech and personality had been strongly influenced by Watase. This one had most likely been influenced by Ukita. Oh, that makes sense. Natsuhiko talked back to her as he thought that. Yeah, the first one was really sassy and angry, like Watase. So that actually makes sense.
じゃあ何なんだ？悪意の権下か？
いや、もっと端的に言えば、僕は BC 粒子さ。
Well, certainly gets to the point.
何？
Subject N jeered at Natsuhiko.
君は情報力場仮説というものを知っているかね？
Ah.
はいや、知らないけど。
なんだ、君は親不孝者だな。情報力場仮説とは、君のご母堂、天川都博士が16年前に表した論文だよ。
Now that you mentioned it, he had seen a book about that in the reference room when his mind was linked with Watase's. Introduction to the Informational Field Theory. Forward. Let's read this again. Four fundamental forces. Accelerating the universe and so on that cannot be explained by these forces alone. It's become clear from recent high-precision observation that the rate in which the universe expands accelerates with time. It's from that survey that the theory of an unknown energy known as dark energy, or repulsive gravity. Pah! Gravity. What of dark energy? Suppose it does exist. What is it? Only speculation. This is a particle physicist formulated a hypothesis. Information. If your fundamental force doesn't indeed exist, there's a high possibility that it is in fact information. Numerical formula to express the equivalence of information volume and energy. After deriving its value, discovered that the said value completely matched up with the rate of universal expansion. In other words, we're exuding information and expanding the universe.
いや、でも、母さんのあの論文がお前に何の関係があるんだ？
Your information?
理解が悪いね。あの論文で書かれていたことで、僕の存在は説明できるんだよ。序文にあった通り、情報とはすなわちエネルギーだ。そしてその情報エネルギーは BC 粒子を媒介に伝播する。たとえ BC を使わなくとも この作用は常に起こってるんだよ。誰だって一つずつ持っているあるものの中でね。
あるものって。
The girl tapped her head while Natsuhiko asked that.
脳さ。 BC 粒子は世界の隅々に満ちている。当然人の脳の中にもね。そして人の精神活動によって生じた印象や感覚は脳内の電気信号から BC 粒子へと常に変換され保持される。つまり浮田の脳内には彼の精神活動を反映する BC 粒子が滞留していたのさ。そこに被験体 N が自分の思考情報を浮田刑事の脳に伝えた。
So essentially, just by the process of thinking, we're sort of leaving traces of our thoughts in there?
すると被験体 N の思考情報を載せた BC 粒子は浮田刑事の脳内に元からあった BC 粒子と入り混じった。その2種類の BC 粒子は相互作用を起こし別種の BC 粒子になり脳内に滞留している。それが僕だよ。
要するにおじさんと被験体 N と2人分の魂が混ざってお前が生まれたってわけか。
魂？はっ、天川博士の息子とも思えないオカルティックな意見だね。まあ君がそう思いたいならそう思えばいい。重要なのはそんなことではなく、僕が確かにここに存在しているということだ。
存在している。その通りだな。
Natsuhiko glared at her and spoke in a clear voice.
おじさんが急におかしくなったことがその証拠だ。お前が理屈をいくら重ねようと僕の意見はただ一つだ。僕はおじさんを元に戻したい。お前が魂でも BC 粒子でも何でもこの考えは変わらない。
ほう。ならば消去するのかね、僕という存在を。確かに君が消えてなくなれと念じるだけで僕は雲散無償する。所詮は僕など肉体を持たないあやふやな存在に過ぎない。だから決しても心が痛まない。そう思っているのかね。
A little bit.
心が痛まないわけないだろう。
It will still weigh on
だ
that.
けどやらなきゃならないんだ。おじさんだってそれを望んでるはずだから。
ん？望んでいるだって？
それはそうだろう。おじさんは本来は正義の人なんだから。
バカか君は。そんなものは不完全な理解に過ぎん。
Ooh. She glared at Natsuhiko.
君に浮田刑事という男の一体何がわかるというのだね。彼の記憶の表層、それも今回のテロを起こした動機などという不完全な情報を得ただけに過ぎないのに、それでおじさんだってそれを望むはずだと？わかるかね。センシズシンパシーだって所詮は不完全なコミュニケーションに過ぎないのさ。人と人はどれだけ話そうと触れ合おうと BC を使おうと決して理解し合えない。せいぜい対象者の情報の一辺を垣間見て理解したつもりになるだけだ。だが僕は浮田の脳内。
You stop doing that, honestly.
彼の心を理解したと言えるのは僕だけさ。真の理解とは融合することに他ならない。だからこそ僕は浮田が望むことをさせたんだ。
望むことって。
例えばこれさ。
The scene in front of them changed the moment subject N said that. was the memory of when Ukita had pointed a gun at Watase.
脆弱な正義と笑うがいいさ。だがこれが僕の選択だ。君を殺してこの状況が終わるならそうしよう。
If I don't, Captain Kasasagi will kill both Subject Y2 and Natsuhiko. Protect everyone, that my life will finally have meaning.
一生に一度くらいは罪に手を染めてでも。
どうだね。これは彼の望みそのものじゃないか。僕が脳内にいるから浮田は変わってしまったって。バカな。僕は彼の背中を一押ししただけさ。
Yeah?
浮田も僕も悪を裁き弱き者を守りたかった。ただそのためだけに隊長さんを断罪しようと思ったんだ。君は君の認識する浮田と先ほどの浮田の様子がちょっと違ったからって騒ぎ立てているだけに過ぎない。さて改めて聞こう。本当に浮田本人は僕の消滅を望んでいるのかね。
Natsuhiko couldn't help but fall silent. She was just as formidable of an enemy as the Subject N in Watase's head, but in a totally different way. Much more rational. Natsuhiko could feel his fighting spirit whittle away, even though he hadn't been corroded by malice. Is it really okay to erase her? Aren't I just butting my nose into Mr. Ukita's business where it isn't needed? You started to think that. You heard Yuri's voice.
ヒコリン、あの子の理論に言いくるめられちゃダメ。
Yes, her logic that, you should just... I suppose what she's really done saying is that I didn't do anything to him, he was always capable of this. He could have ended up this way even if I wasn't in his head. Which, you know what, fair point. That's more reasonable logic than the way I initially read that. You know what, I think I don't even clearly remember how I initially read that. Now that I turn it around that way, that's how I see it.
もし浮田さんの望みが悪を裁くことだとしても、やっぱり隊長さんを裁くのは違うよ。だってそれは本来の浮田さんの考えじゃないもの。
Well, I mean, he did try. At the very least, he lashed out in anger at them.
N ちゃんと入り混じってる時点で、浮田さんは浮田さんじゃなくなってる。だから元の状態に戻すんだよ。本来の浮田さんに。
Natsuko felt his nigh-depleted spirit fighting. Fighting spirit revived at Yuri's words. Composure began returning to his confused mind. It was then that he noticed the contradictions in Subject N's reasoning. Okay.
何がだね。
本来のおじさんの望みは悪を裁くだけじゃないだろう。人を殺さないってのもあったはずだ。お前がそれに気づいてないわけはないよな。
Subject N suddenly laughed at that comment.
ご明察。君もそこまではバカじゃなかったようだね。
当たり前だ。僕はおじさんをちっとも理解できてないのかもしれないけど、それでも僕なりにおじさんを理解しようと思って記憶をずっと見てきたんだ。
どうせ不完全な理解だがね。
The look of resignation rose to her face, then sighed and looked at Natsuhiko.
しかし残念だな。もう少しで君を侵食できたのに。 気づかなかったかね。僕の意見を聞き入れ始めたところで、すでに君の心は僕に侵食されかけていたんだよ。思わぬ邪魔が入って失敗してしまったがね。あと一歩で君とも融合できた。そうすれば君と浮田の二人がかりで隊長さんを殺せたのにな。
Those words sent shivers down Natsuhiko's spine.
お前やっぱり悪意の塊なんだな。
Yeah.
何を今さら。だから君は僕を消しに来たんだろ。
そうだな。そうだったな。
Natsuhiko looked back at her and spoke.
ごめんな。そろそろお前を消すよ。
そうだな。僕ももう悪あがきは予想。ああ、でもその前に一つだけ頼みがあるのだがいいかな。
なんだ。
僕の存在を浮田は自覚していない。僕がここにいたこと、僕がただの悪意の塊などではなく、確かに心があったこと。僕は浮田のためを思って悪意を行使し、君を侵食しようとした。その全ては僕の意志だ。わかるだろう。肉体も脳も持たない僕にも確かに心が存在したんだ。コギとエルゴスム。我を思うゆえに我あり。ではそう思う主体、すなわち心とは何だろうか。脳内で行われる精神活動のことか。脳がなければ心は存在し得ないのか。違うね。心とは情報の集積だ。脳の有無など心があるか否かを決定づける指標にはならない。たとえ僕が素粒子が伝播する情報エネルギーの寄せ集めに過ぎなくても、仮に僕が一枚の記録媒体に刻まれたデジタルデータだったとしても、
Feels like you're buying more time.
僕には心がある。ほんの数時間の生涯でも僕は確かに存在していた。
You're also correct, but it really does feel like you're trying to pad this out for more time.
そのことを忘れないでいてくれたら、僕は安心して消えることができるよ。
But you do want to disappear.
ああ、忘れないよ。健太。
She smiled happily when she heard Natsuhiko tell her that.
ありがとう。特別監視対象な2号。
That was the name of the one Ukita had tried to protect. In the bottom of her heart, the girl understood Ukita's lonely sense of justice. Natsuhiko looked toward her with respect. As he erased her, enemy, enemy, and enemy. You're an enemy, and you're an enemy, and you're an enemy. Natsuhiko and Yuri returned to reality. Ukita was still unconscious. Watase looked at Natsuhiko and Yuri from the side.
終わったのか。
ああ、どのくらい時間かかった？
何？ほんの5分ほどだ。
From an objective perspective, the entire affair only took a small amount of time. Within that time, Natsuhiko and Yuri had their second encounter with Subject N and erased her once again. Suddenly, pain ran through Natsuhiko's head. Uh-oh! He held his head and leaned against the wall.
どうしたのヒコリン。
頭が。
何？大丈夫か、夏彦。
The headache felt like the one he had when he arrived at Labo this morning. It was subtly different. Bizarre discomfort shook his brain alongside the pain. And his five senses hazed over as well. Uh-oh.
なんだこれ。まるで頭に焼けた泥でも流し込まれたみたいな。
頭に泥って。
まさか N ちゃんと接触した後遺症が。
Natsuhiko gasped at Yuri's suggestion. That was very possible, come to think of it. When Subject N came into contact with people, she instantly destroyed their personalities, turning them into almost completely different people. Coming into contact with her brought the risk of her corroding you. Into you. The truth of the matter was that the Subject N inside of Watase and the Subject N inside of Ukita both tried to corrode into Natsuhiko. Natsuhiko shook off her malice and erased her both times. Coming in contact with her multiple times in a row could be a lot more dangerous than I thought, couldn't it? In such a short span of time, Natsuhiko had fought twice with an opponent who was trying to corrupt him. It turned out to be even more of a mental and psychological burden on him than he had expected. Watase and Yuri looked at Natsuhiko's face with concern.
Hikori, 大丈夫?
大丈夫だ。
Natsuhiko forced a smile as he answered.
それより、ユーリは大丈夫なのか?
私は平気みたい。私は浮田さんと直接心をつないだわけじゃないから。N ちゃんとはヒコリンを介して間接的に接触していただけだから。
I'd get there.
そうか。それならよかった。
I don't know why my hand almost casually rests on the right mouse button. So when my hand flinches, I instinctively do that. It's like if you ever catch me doing that, like I've done this 3 times already in this video, but if you ever catch me doing that, it's just my hand twitches and just instinctively puts pressure on the right mouse button. It's annoying. I fear that Natsuhiko served as a sort of padding for her. At any rate, as long as Yuri was okay, Natsuhiko was fine with that. And with that thought in mind, he shook his head and slapped his cheeks. Senses soon came back to him. He still had a headache, but it had faded considerably.
いけそうだ。もう問題ないよ。
問題ないって本当に大丈夫なのか夏彦。顔が真っ青だぞ。おっさんの他にも悪意に感染した奴らはいるはずだ。その消去はまだ続くが、やれそうなのか。
やれるよ。何人でもどんとこいだ。
Natsuhiko gave a strained display of bravado. At any rate, this was not the time to give up. As if Natsuhiko couldn't do it, then Yuri would have to be his replacement.
それより、おじさんの悪意が消えたかを確かめなきゃ。多分大丈夫だとは思うけど。
ああ、そうだな。それじゃあ起こしてみるか。おっさん、起きろ、おっさん。
With a few slaps on the cheek, Ukita finally groaned.
よし、目覚めたぞ。
All good now. Thud.
隊長さん。
Ukita looked around with vacant eyes.
浮田さん、大丈夫ですか？
気分はっていうか、心の中から悪意みたいなものは消えてますか？
What an oddly specific thing for you to say, young man.
夏彦君に優里君まで。そっちには真城君も。一体どうして
Ukita's eyes widened. From the looks of it, Subject N's malice had faded from him. Natsuhiko sighed in relief and answered his questions.
説明すると長くなりますが。
Natsuhiko summarized the situation that Ukita had been put into. How Subject N had used the ability known as Senses Sympathy on Ukita to manipulate his memories, amplify his malice. Was it... They never actually explained. Like, was it just her lingering spirit in her dead body that corrupted Ukita? Or how? How? She lingering in her dead body like Natsuhiko was in his? They have yet to clarify that. And how Natsuhiko and Yuri were also Senses Sympathy users, and thus the only ones who could cancel out that malice. Once he finished hearing Natsuhiko's explanation, Ukita muttered with a bitter look on his face.
つまり僕は BC によって人格を書き換えられていたってことか。
そう言って差し支えないと思います。
そうか。僕らが想像していたよりも
はるかに強力な能力だったんだな。
Ukita spoke regretfully and then looked at Watase with a gasp.
じゃあもしかして隊長さんも？
ま、そんなところだ。被験体 N に悪意を増幅された俺は夏彦たちを銃撃した。それで夏彦は自分の身を守るために俺の記憶をすべて消去したんだ。
We've got that understanding.
記憶喪失になった俺はさっきようやく当の夏彦に記憶を戻してもらったというわけさ。
そうか。
Ukita muttered that with a complicated look on his face.
あと誰が悪意に感染しているんだろうか。
可能性が濃厚なのはジュンさんと立花さんです。
Well, I suppose only one of those was your comrade in arms.
ちょっと待て。サリはどうなんだ？あの子、斧で俺を襲いやがったんだぞ。
She might be corrupted now. Should be interesting. Theory time. Sally's the last person we have to cure of malice. And through her, we learn some about Subject A. End theory. Natsuhiko thought for a second. Sally may have had a slightly eccentric personality, but would she go so far as to take such drastic measures? The possibility that Sally was infected with malice isn't completely out of the question. To be honest, he was frightened by the thought. Sally already had a dangerous side to her. If she were infected with malice, her actions would become truly unpredictable.
じゃあその中で一番危ないのは誰だ？
森部君じゃないのか？
え？ジュンさんがどうして？
実は僕は2時間ほど前、彼女を背後から襲って銃弾を奪ったんだ。
なんですって？どうしてそんなことを
malice?
いや、隊長さんに対抗するためには武器が必要だと思って。だから彼女は僕を憎んでいる可能性が高いだろう。
Now Natsuhiko understood the reason Jun's head was bleeding and why she was wandering around with that engine cutter in hand. Yeah? Yeah, that would do it.
しかもだ、その銃はさっき先生に奪われた。
先生に？
もともと先生が持っていたあの銃さ。一度はバラして3つに分けたが、結局すべて先生の手に戻ったってわけだ。
Sensei's got a gun. Those words made Natsuhiko uncomfortable.
ちょっと待て渡瀬。先生の持っていたあの銃についてなんだけど、あれはお前たちが用意した銃なのか？
いや違う。俺たち3人が持っていた銃は3丁とも NZ75 という銃だ。
Separate gun.
だが先生の持っていた銃はどうやら別の銃なんだよ。
What's the deal with that?
じゃあ、あの銃はどこから出てきたんだ？
There shouldn't have been any guns in Leibo other than the 3 that Watase's comrades had brought in. Yet Anna had a gun, which meant...
おそらくは先生の自前の銃だ。彼女はラボ内で拾ったと言っていたが、嘘だろうな。
Natsuhiko was aghast. Why would an ordinary high school teacher like Anna have her own gun? She was neither a terrorist nor with Leibo, then.
先生は何者なんだ？
That's a good question. Once Natsuhiko said that, Yuri's eyes widened as if she had figured something out.
もしかして先生の正体は保安六課なんじゃ。
Eh?
保安ロッカー？
Yuri nodded as Natsuhiko and Watase tilted their heads in puzzlement. Oh, the security force... The Leibo secret police?
6名士保安課の中に密かに存在している隠
Oh,
蔽担当セクションだよ。
worse than the Leibo secret police.
ラボの手先としていろんな汚れ仕事をやっているの。
Or maybe I was wrong. It was the Leibo secret police. I don't know.
コミュニケーターの拉致とかラボに関する事件の隠蔽とか。
そんなのあるのか？
Understandable surprise.
私の記憶の中で見たんじゃない？ 9年前の ラボの火災の後、病院に押しかけてきて、私をラボに拉致しようとした人たち。あれが保安六課だよ。
Now that you mentioned it, that name had shown up in Ukita's memory too. Furthermore, Natsuhiko remembered hearing rumors of them back in his childhood. Monstrified people captured by a secret task force working under Rokube City's security department and are imprisoned underground.
あの噂も本当だったのか。
Of course they were. Now he finally felt that all of the Seven Wonders had a hidden meaning behind them. Could those have been no mere urban legends, but rather something someone had intentionally tried to spread? Was it a way to disguise the sinister truth as a simple child's gag? Was it a conspiracy someone had tried to leak to the public? As Natsuhiko pondered that question, Ukita spoke up.
僕も聞いたことがある。というか、あって当然だろうね。その手の部隊ってのは、こういう巨大な利権が絡む施設団体にはつきものだ。普通はそういう荒事を担う団体企業などに依頼するものだが、ラボの場合、市がそこまでやってくれるらしい。
悪い冗談みたいな話ですね。
まあ、倫理が壊れているのはラボだけじゃない。六名士も同類だということさ。
Natsuhiko ground his teeth as he heard that. Until now, he'd loved the town he was born and raised in. It didn't change even when Enota told him about the truth of the world and how Rokube City was a fortress built to protect communicators from that world. He had thought that the security department and the surveillance cameras were all to protect the townspeople. But even the city's an enemy too, isn't it? Both Labo and the city government were working in cahoots to create this abnormal world, weren't they? Perhaps his dabbling in Watase's and Ukita's memories had intensified that bitter feeling of his. Yeah, perhaps. At the very least, finally pushed us over the edge into giving up on the delusion that this place is a good thing. Natsuhiko suddenly remembered the time he was in front of the city gate with Salio.
なんだか嫌な場所。
And we dismissed it.
そうか。
まるで市民を閉じ込めているみたい。
Her words were on the mark. Ever since he got stuck in Labo, Natsuhiko had wanted to get out. Yeah, we were just raised in it and lived in comfort in it. So we never noticed how strange it was. Until Sally the outsider came in and said, "Holy fuck, this looks like a prison city." Outside of that birdcage was just a bigger prison. Rokube City itself.
じゃあ椿山先生は教師っていうのは仮の姿で六名士保安課の人間なのか。
Fitting that she'd be the BC teacher. Then first class view into anyone and everyone's BC levels.
僕らを逃がさないように行動しているって。
Working to keep track of how much your powers develop and when.
確証はないがね。だが、市の人間であれば、六名学園に教師として潜り込むことくらい造作もないだろう。そして生徒の中からセンシズシンパシーを発言するコミュニケーターが現れたりしないか監視する。そういう役目の者がいてもまるで不思議ではない。
でも仮に裏の役目があったとしても普段は教師として生活してたんですよ。だった
そこまでは分からんよ。テロの情報を察したか、あるいは偶然か。ともかくここに居合わせた以上、ここで起きたことを全て隠蔽するために動いているかもしれない。
Thinking along those lines, there were several things that came to mind. Like how she had closed her heart to the kids. How she recommended they turn themselves into the security department when the kids were running away from them. Professor Tsubakiyama's with the security department, and that means when she heard about the terrorist plot from us, must have gotten on guard, concluded they'd come to Labo. Eventually, Watase broke his silence with a sigh and spoke up.
要するに悪意の感染の有無にかかわらず全員が危ないと思っといた方がいいってことだな。
ああ、それでもみんなをここに連れてこなきゃならない。
そうなると次に保護すべきは誰だ？
Upon hearing that question, Natsuhiko quickly thought of Salio. Since she had been acting independently this entire time, she most likely had less information to work with than everyone else. She could get dragged into a fight without understanding any of the circumstances and get hurt.
渡瀬、サリをここに連れてきてくれるか。
サリか。前にも言った通り、俺はあの子に敵視されている。穏便に済むとは思えんが、まあ、やるしかないだろうな。
Watase muttered in disgust. Perhaps because he himself was fully aware of why Sally would hate him.
それじゃあ俺はまずサリを探しに行く。浮田さんはこの子たちを守るためここに残ってくれ。
何？しかし守れと言われても。
Ukita, no one can fucking get in here.
分かってる。だからこれを預けておこう。
Oh, gun. Watase took the gun out of his pocket and handed it to Ukita.
これは俺の銃だ。弾は残り少ないがちゃんと弾倉も入ってる。いざとなったらこいつを使うんだ。ただし当てるなよ。威嚇だけだ。
わかった。
Ukita nervously took the gun.
よし、それじゃ行ってくる。
As Watase said that and began to leave, Natsuhiko called out to him.
待ってくれ、渡瀬。お前は銃を持っていかなくていいのか。
平気だよ。こいつがあるからな。
Watase slapped his right bicep and smiled. Watase, you dork.
そうか。でも、気をつけろよ。
あ、
I can't believe you just did that. That's amazing, Watase. You fucking dork. And with that answer, Watase left the shelter. That's one or two levels removed from Watase going, don't worry, I'll be fine without a gun. I got Bofa on me. Natsuhiko goes, Bofa what? Watase, Bofa D's no. Shelter went quiet. After a few silent moments, Natsuhiko spoke to Ukita.
おじさん、ごめんなさい。
何がだね？
僕はおじさんの記憶を勝手に読んでしまいました。プライベートを犯すようなことをしてしまって、本当にすみません。
なんだ、そんなことを気にしているのかい。別に構わないさ。被験体 N の悪意を解除するためには必要なことだったんだろう。
ええ。でも、おじさんがテロを起こした動機に関する記憶はおおむね見てしまいました。
Even though it really didn't have much to do with your malice infection.
さっき過去のフラッシュバックが起きませんでしたか？それが僕が見た記憶です。
なるほどね。でも君に読まれて困るような記憶はなかったはずだよ。
Fair.
だから本当に気にすることはないさ。むしろおかげで自分の信念を再確認できた気がする。ラボと戦おうと決意した日のことを克明に思い出したからね。
僕もおじさんの記憶をたどる過程でそれを追体験しました。おじさんは勇気ある人だと思います。
Look of regret suddenly spread across Ukita's face when Natsuhiko said that.
褒めてくれるのは嬉しいがね。だが勇気を出した結果がこんなざまでは素直に喜べるわけもないな。悪意に感染していた間の自分の行動はもちろん全て覚えている。今か悪意を増幅されている間の自分も確かに僕自身だという気もするんだよ。
Like she said, she only gave him a nudge. She really, by amplifying their malice, she really only pushed them over an edge they were capable of going over anyway. As Ukita muttered that, he looked at the gun in his hands.
僕はこの銃で隊長さんを撃とうとした。 計画が失敗した責任を全て彼に押し付けるようにね。そんな自分の歪小さや卑怯さに気づかされるのがなんというか怖いね。
Natsuhiko understood the meaning behind Ukita's words. No matter how good a person may be, perhaps not a single one is completely free from malice. And those who came into contact with Subject N came to know their true selves, whether they wanted to or not. They all came to realize the monster they harbored in the depths of their minds.
認めたくなかったのさ、そんなことは。善意と勇気を振り絞って行動したつもりが目的を果たせないばかりか最悪の結果を生んでしまったことがね。
おじさん、それは。
Natsuhiko tried to say something, but he couldn't find the words. Ukita shook his head as if to say it's fine and continued. I mustered up the will to do something honestly brave. Dick tried to stand up to the man, the oppressive government, doing human experimentation, and whatnot, but it all went horribly wrong.
僕はいつだってこうなのさ。信念に従って行動してもいつも悪い方向に向かってしまう。多くの人を巻き込み、結局誰も救えず今こんなことになっている。どうせ脆弱な正義ならそれを行使すべきではなかったのかもね。
Natsuhiko pondered those words. Mr. Ukita's methods were indeed flawed in some places. It wasn't as if Ukita had acted in accordance with a perfect sense of justice. Should have been another way. But Yuri did not judge him.
でも浮田さんが私たちを救おうと思ってくれたから私はヒコリに会えたんです。
You could argue that Mr. Ukita acted in a really hot-headed and overreactionary way in deciding to go to these lengths for his goal. He acted without ever really knowing the full extent of what was going on, which indirectly, you could argue, indirectly led Dojima and Hiyama into their deaths, because they walked right up to Subject N, got infected by her malice, and eventually died from it. You can argue that his actions were extremely reckless, got people killed, but they were coming from... You can't argue that they were coming from a good place. That place being that human experimentation is bad. Locking kids up in the basement and using them as guinea pigs is bad and shouldn't happen. That's a good thing. That's a good mindset to have. And what he might have done afterwards is a very... an understandable next step. Especially when considering the level that the government is willing to go to keep Leibo's operations covered up. Not just what's confirmed as true that they've done, but also his perception of what they've done, being the 9 years ago incident with Senior Fellow S, who he perceived as trying to free the test subjects and being silenced. So...
間違っていても信念を貫いて行動してくれたから。だからこんなこと言っても慰めにはならないかもしれませんけど、ありがとうございました。
Once Ukita heard her words of gratitude, he smiled faintly.
いや、救われたよ。 救おうとした相手に救われたんじゃ話が逆だがね。
そうかもですね。
Yuri smiled at those words. If it all worked out in the end, it's okay. Natsuhiko smiled as well and then turned to his thoughts. Mr. Ukita's probably okay now. He had a strong sense of justice to begin with, after all. Now that Ukita was free from malice and regretted his actions, he would probably be a reassuring ally to them now.
それにしてもこのラボについて知るほどにおじさんの気持ちもますます理解できる気がします。
そうかい？
ええ、このラボの内側を知れば知るだけ邪悪な面ばかりが見えてくるじゃないですか。
Correct.
おじさんがそれを暴こうと思ったのもわかりますよ。上層部を裁こうと思う気持ちも。
We're only going to affect change by punishing the upper ranks. Punishing the rank and file doesn't do shit. The upper ranks just circle their wagons and keep their money.
このラボには秘密が多すぎる。後ろ暗いことをやっているから当然ではあるが、問題はそれだけじゃない。僕にはそのせいでコミュニケーターと一般人の対立が世の中で続いているように思うんだ。
対立ですか。
Because Labo holds secrets?
確かに BC の研究は必要だし、秘匿すべき事実もある。だが隠し事をしすぎれば周囲の理解を得ることはできないだろう。十分な情報を与えられない一般人にとっては BC もコミュニケーターも理解できない何かにしか思えないはずだ。
そうか。確かに。
I mean, I kind of get it. But wouldn't the concepts of telepathy and empathy be public knowledge? I guess that's not the shit that would be covered by Rokume City Fox News. But certainly not the actual depictions of them. I could certainly see there being groups that want to foster this distrust and thus run with the overly inflated fear-mongering versions. The communicators are already in your mind. They're turning the frogs gay. That outside of Rokume City, disputes between communicators and ordinary people had yet to die down. Thought made Natsuhiko depressed.
おじさん、コミュニケーターと一般人が分かり合える社会は来るんでしょうか。
I suppose the implication is that there was never really a clear... There's all this special stuff afforded to communicators for their protection. But I guess there might be a chance that there would be some kind of... or that there would never be some kind of just straight up, flat out scientific studies published to the public, or some equivalent Bill Nye level explanation of BC to normalize it to the normal public. If there was, that wouldn't exactly make things any better. Because you still have to work on the people with the preconceived notions about what communicators are and what they might do to you. That's the hurdle. And it's those people who try to push their views onto future generations to propagate the discord going forward.
このラボは本当はそのための研究をするべきだったんじゃないですか。
僕だって無論そうは思うが、 ラボの上層部はそう考えていないんだ。彼らが BC 研究に血道を上げてるのは、やれ公共の治安のためだ、社会不安を起こさないためだと理由付けしているが、本音を明かせば目的は金さ。
金？
そうとも。ラボは世界に先んじて BC 研究を進め、その研究成果を諸国に売ろうとしているんだよ。ラボと6名士の取引先にベテルギウス新薬という外資系企業があってね、そことつるんで金儲けを目論んでるのさ。じゃなければ幽閉した被験体を研究対象になどするものか。
Really?
公共の治安のためというのであれば単に幽閉しておけばいい。無人島などで穏やかに暮らさせるのもありだ。なのにそうしないで被験体を人体実験に使っているのが黒幕連中の真意を明確に表していると思わないかね。
ヘドの出る話ですね。
ああ、だから連中にとってはコミュニケーターと一般人の対立が激化しようとむしろ願ったり叶ったりで。
What? Wow. Just then Yuri interrupted Ukita before he could continue.
いいえ、浮田さん。昔はそういう研究だってしている人はいたんです。
というと、例えば
例えば AD です。 AD の正式名称はアローンデザイア、孤独を望む薬です。人と人をつなぐ力、 BC を否定する薬なんですよ。
Oh. Natsuhiko gasped. True enough, with continued dosage of AD, a communicator would be no different from an ordinary person. Used the other way around, an ordinary person could come into contact with communicators without fear.
AD が普及すれば今ほどコミュニケーターが特別視されることはなくなる。あの薬はそのために開発されたと聞きました。
しかしだよ、僕もラボでジュニアフェローまで昇進したが AD にそんな開発目的があるとは聞いたことがないぞ。
でしょうね。 AD の開発はラボが設立された頃からずっと続けられているそうです。それから十数年が経ってラボの倫理観も少しずつ壊れて、当初の開発目的なんてとうに忘れられたんだと思います。だから開発が始まった当初、開発者が何を思ってこの名を付けたのかは分かりませんが、この名前にその人の思いが込められているとは思いませんか？
やや干渉が過ぎるとは思うが。
Ukita didn't completely reject Yuri's line of thought. Natsuhiko likewise just barely agreed.
でも他には何かそういうのってあるのか？
あるよ。他でもない WX 粒子増幅器がそうなの。
増幅器が？あれのどこが一般人とコミュニケーターの溝を埋めるものなんだ？
Yuri calmly replied.
ヒコリン、WX 粒子増幅器ってどういうものなのかわかる？
It amplifies WX particles.
BC 粒子のエネルギー量を増幅させるっていうことの意味が。BC 粒子のエネルギー量はコミュニケーターが BC を使った時に上昇するでしょ。脳内で生成された情報エネルギーが外に解き放たれて、ということはつまり。
Natsuhiko gasped in surprise.
まさか。
BC particles have the property of transmitting and propagating the information energy of living creatures' thoughts. In which case, amplifying their energy meant...
あの機械の中にはね、一種の人工頭脳が入っているの。
Meant what? I'm not following. Yuri Komi made that statement.
人工頭脳？
そんなものが今の技術で作れるのかね。
頭脳を丸ごと一から作ることはやっぱり難しいそうです。だから BC レセプターのみを模して作られた機械、人工 BC レセプターなんです。
I genuinely don't know what to make of this fact. BC receptor, the organ relating to BC usage located in the prefrontal cortex of the human brain. Natsuhiko had heard about it once in one of Anna's lectures.
そんな本当なのか？
間違いないよ。だって私たち被験体はあの機械の研究開発にずっと協力してきたんだから。あの機械が作られたのはラボが設立された14年前。最初の被験体 A さんから採取したデータを元に作られて、他の被験体たちのデータを元に改良されていったんだよ。A さんは私がラボに来る前に亡くなって、N ちゃんと私も顔を合わせることはなかったけど、私たちから採取されたデータ、私たちが使った PC、私たちの心の一部からあの機械は作られた。そうして出来上がったのは意志もなく魂もなく、ただ強力な情報エネルギーを生成し続ける機械。 WX 粒子が生成されるっていうのはね、いわば何のメッセージも込められてない PC が送信されるってことなんだよ。そこに存在するのは漠然とした思いだけ。 PC という能力が持つ原初の目的、人と人をつなげようとする思い。
そうだったのか。
Natsuhiko noticed that what Yuri said was the answer to a question he hadn't even considered up until then. Why would an environment full of WX particles increase the efficiency of BC use? The answer was that WX particles themselves were filled with a desire to connect people. What the fuck does that mean? What does that even... Welcome to the tip zone. We have a lot of tips to read. Eclipse. Based on their privilege to mobilize a self-governed police force, government-designated top-secret cities have the privilege to form a self-governed quasi-police force for their own proprietary use. Rokume City's Security Department is one such quasi-police force and is divided into 5 sectors as labeled on the municipal office's guide map. Incidentally, that is not all there is to the story. The municipal office has a secret basement floor with a section that even staff members do not know about. That section is named Security Sector 6, a secret task force that erases information inconvenient to the city. The city also calls this task force Eclipse, as they hide information the same way one heavenly body hides another during an eclipse. Well, that's ominous. Also fits with the celestial body theme of the 2 governmental forces we know about, Sirius, the rescue squad, and Eclipse, the secret police. Also, that's kind of fucked up. Government-designated top-secret cities get to make their own quasi-police force. Kind of reminds me of how they're, like, I think the story is they're preparing to sell land in Nevada to corporations and allow them to form their own cities and make their own governments. That's fucked up. AD. Abbreviation for Alone Desire. BC receptor function inhibitor developed by the pharmaceutical company Betelgeuse New Treatments. Intravenous injection can inhibit BC receptor function, obstruct M particle production, and nullify BC energy up to 4,000 milliscalar values per hour. Effective for roughly 1 hour. Hence the 4,000 figure. When used on communicators, it seals their BC ability. When used on ordinary people, protects their minds from BC. Additionally, AD goes through the vascular system to protect the entire body from genetic damage due to WX particles. Thus, while it may not be a radiation exposure drug, it is still an exposure drug nonetheless. Pretty much we already knew that. Well, yeah. Look at a red stoplight long enough, it will eventually turn green. Physiologically speaking, when you see a green light, cone cells in your retina are receiving light at a wavelength of approximately 530 nanometers. However, science cannot explain what sort of green that green light feels like. These sorts of subjective experiences of sight and the other senses are called qualia. The elucidation of qualia has long been a major problem in science, but now in 2030 there is new hope for a solution. The Senses Sympathy ability exclusive to ranks S aptitude communicators. Their solution is still far from foolproof, as even if you can experience both someone else's idea of green and your own, It would still be impossible to tell a third party the difference between those greens without using vague, unreliable words. Furthermore, the overuse of senses sympathy puts communicators at risk for accelerated edification. Losing your own personality, so to speak. A scary thing. You can perceive color through someone else's eyes, but you have no way to relay the difference, because it's coming out of your own head. WX amplifier. Is meant for the continuous amplification of W particle energy, constructed as an artificial BC receptor based off the BC receptor in the human brain. This simulacrum of a human organ is something of an artificial intelligence, albeit a partial one. This enormous machine controlled by the supercomputer brain cell. However, unlike real BC receptors, the amplifier cannot generate M particles on its own. Present information that is meaningful to humans can only be created by humans themselves. The amplifier generates huge amounts of heat during operation, and thus it intermittently brings in water from Lake Rokame through an intake pipe, cooling before recirculating the water back into Lake Rokame through the drainage pipe. Therefore, operation of the amplifier requires proper technical knowledge and extreme care. In the case that cooling becomes impossible for an extended period of time and improper operation continues, the amplifier will malfunction, generating and emitting an inexhaustible supply of WX particles. Labor researchers call this event a meltdown and spare no effort to ensure such a meltdown doesn't occur. During the meltdown of the amplifier in this incident, a high-frequency electric current flowed into the amplifier itself, causing it to emit powerful and unstable electromagnetic waves. The reason Watase and Kasumi had extremely unstable connections when trying to contact the surface was due to the interference of those waves. That makes sense. I will fully admit that maybe I'm a little tired. Long day. I don't fully understand this whole super brain thing the WX amplifier is going on, and why that means this was created as a good thing. Unless it was meant to replace the human experiments to allow them to study BC more. That's about the only way the origins of the WX amplifier have good intentions. The only thing I can think of. BC energy related to the fifth fundamental force defined in Natsuhiko Tenkawa's informational field theory. Once called dark energy, this energy is said to be the cause of the accelerating expansion of the universe. In the same way that electricity has positive and negative charges, BC energy is also said to have two associated types of charges, where likes repel and unlikes attract. It's said that a consciousness is born once the threshold of this BC energy is reached. It's said that one day BC energy will not only explain BC, but perhaps other things as well, such as qualia, inner mental worlds, and the collective unconscious. However, the informational field theory that defines BC energy still has many uncertain factors, such as how it relies on the assumed existence of heretofore undiscovered particles. The day comes that the many uncertainties surrounding this theory are cleared up and an informational field law is formed. New questions may arise. Unless the theories disprove it, the notion that the consciousness is formed from BC energy as an observing, thinking lump of information cannot be denied. Nearly 150 years after it was proposed, Maxwell's demon was proven not to exist as proposed. Can the existence of the self-aware informational field theory be denied in the same way? God, Maxwell's demon, I remember that fucking lesson. That was infuriating. Oh, you could, in theory, put a shit ton of energy towards fucking up Maxwell's demon. And it's not actually worth it to spend that amount of time and energy fucking up Maxwell's demon, but it is in theory possible. So therefore, Maxwell's demon busted. Beetlejuice new treatments. Ah, yes. Oh, the French pharmaceutical company that employs Antoine Courbet, the physiologist who proposed the ESB synchronization hypothesis that helped bring BC to light worldwide. Currently, Rokame City possesses over 40% of the company's stocks. Using the city's research results, the company is credited with many innovations such as the successful development and production of AD. medical industry, a unique new drug that generates large profits for its pharmaceutical company is called a blockbuster drug. AD is such a blockbuster drug for Betelgeuse new treatments. Its ability to nullify the effects of BC energy up to 4,000 milliscalar value per hour. That's really unwieldy to say. Has received unanimous praise in many developed nations, making Betelgeuse new treatments a world-leading company overnight. After the 2018 revision to the Pharmaceutical Affairs Law, regulations on drugs targeting BC and communicators were softened at a huge scale. Many pharmaceutical companies got on board with trying to develop new and novel drugs, but were unable to compete with Betelgeuse new treatment at their industry-leading AD. Also of notice is that due to Rokume City's nature as a government-designated top-secret city, not much information exchange happens between the city and the outside world, ostensibly thanks to Eclipse's involvement. This concealment of information is the reason why the Rokume City Fire Department believes that Labo is a nuclear research facility and that AD is an anti-radiation drug. So is this relationship with an outside company happening with the government and the secret police's knowledge, or is it happening behind their back? I suppose that doesn't really matter. But it's entirely possible. But it's still really scummy. Welcome to Big Pharma. Some things never change. At any rate, don't really understand this talk about the WX particle amplifier being a big brain. Mother brain. I mean, I kind of get it, but I'm not mentally equipped to fully process it right now. So we'll do that next time. Until next time, until then.